I remember just laying on my bed in a fetal position, feeling so sorry for myself, just feeling like, oh no, woe is me. Like, we're down 2.5 weeks into Vegas.
Hello and welcome to the Neighborhood Money Podcast, a video podcast where we talk about money, entrepreneurship, and building a life you deserve. Drew, this week we've got such a unique conversation for our listeners. Do you want to tell them a little bit about it?
Yeah, very unique. We have Chris Hanna on the episode today, and he talks about his path with college, being a professional card counter and blackjack, to turning down a hedge fund, to starting his own financial coaching business, to being very involved in jiu-jitsu. It's a very wide span of topics, very unique, but very, very interesting and very cool to listen to the whole conversation start to finish.
It's so awesome that we got the chance to speak with Chris, because you don't get the chance to talk to someone that actually professionally counts cards and makes a living off of it. So it was really cool to hear his story and the journey that took him from, like you were saying, card counting to jiu-jitsu to now financial coaching. And he's got a really unique take on the traditional way to budget. So I highly recommend watching the whole conversation, because there's a lot of interesting tidbits throughout the whole interview, throughout the whole time that we got to speak with Chris.
So let's head in and listen to Chris.
Joining us this week in the neighborhood is Chris Hanna, professional card counter and financial coach. Chris's coaching motto is master your money, live your dream, and adventure. Chris, we are so glad to have you join us here in the neighborhood studio. And man, I got to tell you, I'm so excited, because it's not every day that you get to talk to someone that counts cards or counted cards as their job. So thank you so much for joining us here on the podcast. How's it going?
It's going great. And thank you guys so much for having me. I told you before, I was listening to your podcast, and you guys just have such a great vibe that I think you really can only have after you've been friends for so long. So thanks for having me.
I got to put one thing out there, because you're not the first one that threw it or asked us, is we've gotten this question out a couple of times. We are not from Canada. We are from Minnesota, northern Minnesota, but we are not from Canada, from the Great White North up above us. So just everyone listening, just keep that in mind.
Minnesota, not from Canada. Eh?
So, Chris, I got to ask you right off the bat, because, just in that brief intro, I'm sure all of our listeners are already wondering, as I'm already wondering too, is how does one actually get into counting cards? So could you first explain what exactly counting cards is, and then really walk us down the path of how you got started in making blackjack your full-time job?
Yeah, counting cards is a way to keep track of the high and low cards that come out of, that come out during a blackjack game, so that how many more high and low cards are left to be played. And you start by watching the movie 21. It's the movie that
great movie
introduced me to this concept. And despite it being, on a theater screen, and like just knowing that, okay, it probably doesn't happen quite like this, it did introduce me to this idea that, okay, statistically, there's some legitimacy here. And so I saw that when I was in either late middle school or early high school. And I think even that night I went home and maybe got out a deck of cards, probably like a lot of people did when they first saw it.
Right.
But it was a seed that was planted in my head. And then something like, I don't know, 8-10 years later, whatever it was, when I finally did turn 21, that's when I thought to myself, okay, well, now I can actually go to these casinos and gamble. Let me give this a fair shot. At that point, it was about 6 months before I was about to graduate college, and my college roommate, he and I had already been good buddies, and I knew he was a numbers guy, wanted to go not really take a regular job and just see if we could do something a bit more adventurous. And so I asked him if he wanted to learn how to count cards and play blackjack with me, and he said he was up for it. Literally just over a text message, one night. I was at home during our winter break, and yeah, he said he was down for it. So yeah, we got back for our final semester of college, and at the time I had already had like my books ordered for the CFA, is the Chartered Financial Analyst, exam.
Okay. Yep.
And I was thinking I was going to, study for that. My exam date was in June. I don't think I studied for an hour for that exam, because all I did instead was just study and practice blackjack every single day. got the table, the felt out, 6 decks, a shoe to practice on, everything. And that's really how we got started with it.
So did you guys have like a underground casino during college where you guys practiced your skills?
It's so wild that how things work out, but we were supposed to be in a dorm that had 4 singles to each room, so a shared kitchen and, bathrooms or whatever, but 4 individual rooms.
Okay.
For seniors only. And I don't know, there were maybe 4 or 5 rooms in the entire, apartments, whatever, in the entire building that had 2 singles and a shared double. And so when we first got there, we're like, what are the chances? We want our single rooms. We're seniors. We want our own space.
Yeah.
We ended up sharing this double, and it was more spacious and all. And that's the underground casino, so to speak, that we played in. So we had our table out for every day. Like we had the table out, we had the felt over it. That's where we played and practiced.
You said you started out in middle school or whatever actually was when you first saw the movie. Did you actually practice counting cards that entire time, or did you pick it up a little bit and then really dive deep into it, like you said, when you were in your last semester or last year of college?
I probably picked it up for a couple hours, back when I was, 14 or 15 years old. And then I never really touched it again until I was 21.
Okay.
So many years later, yeah.
One thing that's so fascinating about your story is you kind of alluded to it, the fact that you went to college, you were going to study for your CFA exam. You were doing everything that people tell you to do until you got to graduation and you decided to really just live outside of societal norms. So rather than going and getting a traditional 9-to-5 job, you took off and you decided, hey, I'm going to take a chance. I'm going to take that leap of faith and I'm going to try to make this blackjack card counting job a reality. And that's exactly what you did. Could you walk us down that path on, what was your mindset leaving the safety of having a college education, graduating, probably had a few jobs lined up too, just saying, hey, you know what, I'm going to be an entrepreneur. I'm going to make card counting my job.
Yeah, well, for me, right, and I just always wanted my independence. I really, for the life of me, did not enjoy school. I mean, after 8th grade, I had a blast in middle school. So if anyone's listening from, that time, like we had a blast. It was a great group of kids, whatever. But from like 9th grade through high school and onwards through college, I just really didn't want to be there. And I was a fine student, but it didn't take much for me. All it took was that little push, that little, spark of potential, inspiration to do something different that led me down that path. So as far as kind of what it felt like, it's just like, peace out. I mean, I to the best of my ability, I want to be done with that and never go back.
So with that being you wanting like your independence a lot, is that kind of been your personality to, I guess, I don't know if it'd be considered an impulse to go into this, leaving college and these internships, but like, do you kind of have that personality growing up of if you kind of had something in your mind, you just wanted to do it no matter what, kind of put your blinders on and just focus?
Yeah, 100%. It felt like, certainly in sports. So I played soccer most of my life up through high school anyway. I think I was the captain of every team that I'd been on. I was class president during, for a year in high school. It just, if I set my mind to something, I usually went after it and found a way to accomplish it. And the blackjack thing is funny because it might have started off originally, like the idea probably started as an impulse, but we ran, like we learned about the numbers. Like I had already, like AP stats was one of my favorite classes in high school. I then took a couple more stats classes in college. So the fact that I could, I understood what it meant to have an expected value and a standard deviation. So I'm like, if we play a certain number of hands, and for listeners who aren't familiar, it's the average amount that you should expect to have with some room for a little room above and below where you expect to have it. And so as I started looking at it and running the numbers, I was like, oh, if we play enough hands and bet enough money, eventually 2 or 3 standard deviations down is still in the positive, meaning that even if we're not where we need to be, we're still going to be making money. So, having run those numbers, I was like, all right, well, let's go for it.
Okay, so like more of a calculated risk, you're able to use the brain and make it
Yeah,
happen.
that was our intention. Yeah.
So what were those early days like, leaving college, packing up, just driving off? What were those early days like when you started actually counting cards for your job?
It was a blast. I can probably recall 3 or 4 of my favorite days of my entire life are all pretty much all take place inside my car with me driving, hand out the window, just not like any other responsibility in the world.
Yeah.
One of those happened when we were just a couple months after we graduated. At that point, we had put a bankroll together. We were driving around to a bunch of the local casinos, and you can just imagine, someone who's always wanted their independence, 22 years old, right out of college, when everyone else is working a regular job, and here my buddy and I are literally just like traveling around. If we saw a sign for a casino, we stopped at it, and went in with a bankroll and played, knowing that the more we played, the more we were going to make money, not just like played to gamble,
Right.
So yeah, it was an amazing feeling.
So one of the things that you've talked about before is the fact that you really saw blackjack as investing and not gambling, like you just said, because me and many other people, they look at blackjack as something that you go out, a night. Every once in a while, you gamble. You might win a little bit of money. You probably are expecting to lose, but that's really not how you saw it, was it?
No, not in the slightest, because, and I didn't really sort of put 2 and 2 together in this way back then, but I can look back at it now and say, oh, you know what? It's really not so much the medium, the vehicle that you are using that's going to determine whether or not you're investing or gambling. It's going to be how you wager your money or invest your money, how you make your decisions and what knowledge you have during that process as you use it, that's going to determine really whether or not you're investing or gambling. And really at the end of the day, if you play a certain way, so with blackjack, you really have to start the conversation with an understanding of something called the house edge. You guys are probably familiar with it, but every game in the casino has an average amount that the casino wins for every $1 or $100 that's wagered. In blackjack, that house edge is very small compared to many other games like roulette.
Sure.
So, and not only is it small, but it fluctuates throughout the game. So sometimes it's actually positive and sometimes it's negative. Anytime that you're playing, and no matter what it is, if you have a negative edge, an average amount that you're going to lose for every dollar that you wager or bet, the more times that you play and the more money that you wager, the more you're going to lose. And the reverse is true when you have a positive edge, which is what counting cards enables you to capitalize on. So, it was quite literally there in front of me on a computer screen that says the more you play in this exact way, precise way, right? It's not like there's no gut feeling involved. I mean, you are literally playing there like a computer. The only reason we would ever deviate from the bet that we were supposed to be betting or the play that we were supposed to be making was a strategic call to cover ourselves, like to stay a bit more under the radar. And even then, it was calculated. Like there are some plays that will cost you less to make that cover bet, like doubling an 11 versus an 11. Like people make that sort of mistake all the time. It's not what basic strategy says you should do, but at a true count of 1.5, you're actually supposed to double your bet. So if we just did it all the time, we look more like a gambler and it doesn't cost us very much.
I'm glad you brought it up because counting cards is looked down upon. It's not illegal, right? Like it's not, you're not going to get thrown in jail for counting cards, but casinos will throw you out if they catch you counting cards. Like it's not allowed at the casino. So what were some of the things that you did to stay under the radar, and not just look like a computer while you were sitting at the felt?
Yeah, a couple things. And they all really, it really relies on you playing with at least one other player. And the reason is because I would say the 2 single biggest giveaways is your betting pattern and never taking your eyes off the table, or at least ensuring that you see every card that comes out. So even if several cards are played, you might look up at a TV screen or something and look back down. But like casinos are, they're not stupid. So that's what they're looking out for. When you can play with a partner though, or more than one player, you can alternate who's keeping track of the count, and you can alternate your bets. So, in sort of understanding what a regular gambler looks like, a regular gambler, more times than not, walks into a casino and likes to parlay their bets, meaning that if they have, let's say they walk in with a couple $100, well, if they can place down a $25 bet and ride that out and play with the house money, they're going to do that. So you can imagine if you put down, $25 and you win, well, it's more likely for you to increase your bet there, maybe play 50. It's less likely, not to say that it never happens, but it's less likely to like play $25, lose, and then play 150. So that's what the count calls for sometimes. The count is what dictates how much you're supposed to bet and how you make your plays. But if you can play with a partner, And so we would very often be at the same table as friends. We sometimes we sort of pretended like we didn't know each other, but more times than not, and over time, we actually just went in like we were buddies. And so if the count dictated a bet, well, sometimes if he won his hand and I lost mine, and he could up his bet and I could sort of maintain mine or decrease it, so that as a team we still had the optimal amount on the table, but it wasn't so suspicious. So our betting patterns alternating, who was keeping track of the count, those were a couple things.
When you were saying playing blackjack like a computer, it kind of brings up a question for me of, there seems to be always so much emotion when it comes to money, especially, investing or gambling. How was it that you curbed your emotions? Was it just the amount of trial and error, the amount of games you played, or you just had all your faith in the calculations and the probability?
It got better over time, but there were definitely instances where it was like a gut punch when, like, we were out in Vegas. The first time we went out to Vegas to play, it was shortly after we graduated from college. We took a road trip out there, and it was like, I think 2 or 3 weeks in, and we were actually down just because there's so much volatility. And I remember I was like, this is a lot of work. We're just playing every day, and to put that much effort into it, and for all of that, I remember just laying on my bed in a fetal position, feeling so sorry for myself, just feeling like, oh no, woe is me. Like, we're down 2.5 weeks into Vegas. So early on it was tough. We left Vegas up, thankfully. We had a really great run towards the end. And over time, as we recorded more and more sessions, despite all that volatility, our bankroll and everything, our wins were trending upwards. So in the same way that you might look at a stock chart, let's say the S&P 500, and you see that it's fluctuating on the day-to-day. Yeah, but over time, over the last 10 years, you get enough sort of trials in there, and you eventually see that it trends upwards. And that's really what enabled us to feel more secure. And over time, we could walk out of there down a couple $1,000s, whatever it might have been. We're like, just get more hands in.
And did learning that type of emotional intelligence, did that really help you then outside of playing blackjack, and more so like in your money management life or in your investing life outside of blackjack?
Yes, absolutely. So, and when you're playing blackjack, the fact that you're playing with chips almost makes the money less real. It's not like they're stacking $100 bills every time you win or lose or taking it away. So through that process and through winning and losing with all that volatility, afterwards, it just, for better or for worse, I like to think for better, because, emotion can really throw a wrench in your investing plans if you draw your money too early or overbet on something that is really just a gamble than an investment. So it definitely helped me be more, almost like numb to it, for lack of a better term. As long as I understood the underlying math, you're still going to have all that uncertainty and emotion when it's truly a gamble. But when you're like, oh, this is a numbers-based game, like this is the law of averages, the law of large numbers. The more times I play with this positive edge, the more I'm going to win. And so I guess that's how I look at it now.
I know that you do some you're a financial coach now. Do you find it with some of your clients, you're talking about chips, they don't really feel like real money. Do you feel in your clients' personal life, when they use digital money, such as a debit card or credit card, they kind of have that same feeling where it doesn't feel like real money, and they'll buy things that they normally wouldn't if they had cash in their hands?
Yes. Both with I'm not sure actually if you mentioned in that just now, but like not just the credit cards and the debit cards and stuff, but crypto as well. I've seen, and not for purchases, but for just like playing around with it, buying and selling it, and just feeling like, oh, the money's already in there, so I might as well. But no, like this is the money that you've put in there, that you've worked hard for. This is not just numbers on a screen. And one of the ways that you curb that is just by keeping a closer eye on your money. So looking at your bank accounts on a fairly consistent basis. It doesn't have to be like relentless. It doesn't have to be every single day, but you should have you should be keeping an eye. You should be keeping an eye on your money and your bank accounts, so that even if you are using a credit or a debit card, you still have a general idea of, what kind of money, what your money looks like.
Before we dive into all the work that you're doing through financial coaching. I do have one more question just around Blackjack, because I think it kind of ties into that and really segues us nicely into your financial coaching work. But what other, so you talked a little bit about emotional intelligence and really learning to handle your emotions while playing Blackjack. Did you learn any other lessons through your time playing Blackjack professionally that really helped you and got you started in financial coaching?
Yes, we really had to simplify a lot of systems and practice things to such a like ridiculous degree that so that we could actually perform and do, what felt like 10 different things at the same time. So it was kind of a combination of simplifying processes and then learning how to practice, like deliberate practice in that way is something that I will take with me for the rest of my life. Financial coaching, for sure, and anything afterwards. So like in Blackjack, if I can sort of give you guys a look through my lens of it, it's you're at a table. As the cards come out, you're keeping a running count. As you get more through the shoot, you have to keep an eye on the discard tray because your running count is useless when you have multiple decks. You need to be able to calculate what the count is relative to how many decks are left to be played. Because, a running count of 6 with one deck, saying that there's supposed to be, 6 more high cards left to come out, is very different than a running count of 6 with 6 decks remaining. And so you keep an eye on the discard tray to divide your running count by the subtract the number of decks that are in the discard tray from the number of decks that you started with. Divide your running count by the number of decks remaining to get your true count. Then you use your true count to determine how many betting units you're going to place. You got to keep that in mind so that you don't over or under bet. Then there's about 75 plays that you have to memorize. 53 of those are deviations of this basic strategy chart. And then you do all of this while you're having casual conversations with the dealer or the pit boss or the guy next to you that wants to hear about your life story. And it's like to get to that level though, you have to practice so freaking diligently. And that process absolutely is something that I can replicate in other things that I learned throughout my life.
It kind of brought up a funny point for me as you're talking about that. Have you ever had where you're doing so many things and you're trying to have a conversation that you slip up and be like, oh, so what do you do? Oh, I'm a professional card counter. Oh, shoot.
I haven't slipped up to that degree, but for sure, someone might, ask a question and I might just like stutter or not know or be like, just give some random answer to just kind of get them off my back. I'm sure that's happened at some point.
Well, my image of you and then your partner at the time is you guys just in Vegas and, given like the hand signal that they do in 21 and you just sit down and spot or whatever it's called. But that's super fascinating, Chris. And I'm sure you learned a ton of things to take with you as you moved into your financial coaching. So take us through that journey. How did you get from being a professional card counter to now helping people manage their money?
Yeah, I had this moment a couple years after I graduated. So I we did the whole Blackjack thing for a while. That, ultimately, as we relied on that as a source of income, we just would have needed a much bigger bankroll to really support ourselves. 2 people to draw from that. We just would have needed a way bigger bankroll. So eventually I started doing all this different gig work. I was driving for Lyft and Uber, teaching and tutoring and babysitting. And eventually I took up a sort of more stable position with a financial literacy organization, teaching kids about money after school.
Okay.
And it just got to a point where I was finally making more consistent income. But a while into that, I remember just feeling like, you know what? I'm completely lost when it comes to my personal finances. Like anything that I have studied previously, despite this degree that I have in finance and economics, I have experience at hedge funds and on Wall Street. Like none of that, no Blackjack, none of that prepared me for the nuance of personal finance. Like just understanding what to do with your money, how to stick to a plan, how to track and organize it in an efficient way. And so it was that realization that really kind of hurt to like, if I was being honest with myself, I was kind of like, damn, I should really know this. And so that is what, that was the catalyst that, drove me to dive deep into personal finance. It was after I really got into it and I was struggling with all the traditional methods of like budgeting and expense tracking. I like that even now, it still bothers me that not enough people, like, there are other people that do what I do, and we can get into sort of like my process. There are other people that do it, but it's just not talked about enough. And so as I learned that, you can actually use multiple bank accounts, distribute your income as it comes in, and just keep track of those distributions to make great decisions with your money, stick to those decisions, and always know where your money is going. Like, way simpler than tracking your every single expense and categorizing it and, looking back at a budget with 50 different categories. So eventually, as I got better and better at that, I started helping friends and family with it. And then I eventually said, okay, well, now I can actually help other folks and they can pay me for it. So I started reaching out to, and this is a story, in and of itself, but I started reaching out to UFC fighters. I had just been a fan of the UFC for a long time. I'd been training jiu-jitsu, which is the grappling martial art, and mixed martial arts. And I knew that they were only earning money like very infrequently, maybe a couple times a year. So I started reaching out to them. I could already sort of speak their language, knew their lifestyle a little bit. And that was the first group of folks that I started working with.
With you being in jiu-jitsu, did you see a time when, say, like, you're in the locker room chatting with the other guys and you started talking about finances? Did you see that there was just like a need where maybe people were always asking you, like, hey, what should I do here? What should I do there? And you just kind of give these little tips and then be like, you know what? I think I can actually, help even more people with this, and your niche would be more in the UFC.
Yeah, I don't know if it happens so much in the locker room specifically, but just in my everyday life with my friends, with family, just whatever sort of interaction it was, like they might be talking about something, and I was just hearing how it was almost like a confirmation of this realization that I had, which was like, if I'm struggling with this, despite all of my formal education, what does that mean for everybody else? Right. So it was just, I would hear these things, and just people who are generally bewildered when it comes to, personal finance and investing and taxes. And so it definitely inspired me to want to talk about it more, share with more people, and start building a business with it.
So I do want to you touched a little bit on it a little bit ago, but the whole budgeting, I think you have a really unique sense and take on budgeting. Now, me personally, I'm also a numbers nerd, mathematic background and all that stuff. So I actually love budgeting. I love diving into the nitty gritty details, but it can be super cumbersome. And you kind of take a completely different approach to managing money. And if you can correct me if I'm wrong, but you don't necessarily like the way that traditional people actually budget.
Right. Yeah. So if you think about the traditional budget and the way that you manage money with, what you classically call budgeting, it sort of rests on the foundation of a single checking account, and all of your spending comes out of there. Well, when you have a budget with multiple categories and only one spending account, the only way that you can actually stick to that budget is by tracking every expense, categorizing it, subtracting it from the original budgeted amount for that category, anytime throughout the month, 2-3 weeks in, whatever it is. That's the only way you can actually know middle of the month, when you're looking at this one sum of money, how much you have left to spend in each category. So it's, we spend our money on so many different things that it really is, it can be extremely difficult to actually use that as a money management system. And it is actually so tedious for most people to a point that they eventually stop. Or, maybe at best, they're like, oh, I'll do all the tracking and categorizing at the end of the month, which means that your money management system, so to speak, is reactive. Like it's not a proactive approach to actually making good decisions with your money.
Yeah, you don't see it in real time.
Exactly. And so that's sort of the beef that I have with traditional budgeting.
So how does someone not go down the traditional path of budgeting, but more so go down your path? How many accounts do they need to open up? What does that actually look like in practice?
Yes. So really, if you think about what you want out of managing money, like when people first start looking at their bank account and they're like, oh, I don't know where my money went, or they have anxiety before they spend money, or guilt afterwards, or they have lofty goals or even realistic goals and they're not sure how to accomplish it. Like a lot of that, boils down to a simple sort of premise in managing money, like a simple goal, which is you want to use your money in the most effective way possible to live the life that you want to live, to achieve your goals, but ultimately you want to use it effectively. Like you want to give that money a purpose and make sure that you're actually sticking to that purpose. So the way that the way I look at it is with these three underlying principles or actions. The first is that you need to decide what to do with your money. So like we can use a budget in just regular conversation, but really when I think about it, it's like it's not so much a budget as it is deciding what to do with my money. Meaning that when I receive an income, or when a listener receives, a biweekly salary, or if you're a gig worker or an hourly worker, or an entrepreneur, like no matter what sum of money that actually hits your bank account, before you spend a single penny of it, you have the opportunity to be strategic with it. You have the opportunity to actually go down the list and say, here's what I'm going to do with this money. The second sort of action is to ensure that you stick to that decision. So we've talked about with classic budgeting, you can make this great plan with all these categories, but it's inefficient to try and track your expenses as a way of ensuring that you actually stick to it. What you ought to do instead is utilize the beauty of the cash envelope system, which is that you would, spread your money, distribute your cash into several different envelopes, and then only use each envelope for its intended purpose. I say use the beauty of it and not the actual system, because we don't use cash like we used to. You don't get paid in cash. You don't want to spend money in cash. You don't want to run to the bank and the ATM. So what you can do instead of having cash envelopes is have bank accounts or digital envelopes, digital buckets, whatever you want to call it. And again, the beauty of that system is that it is you proactively putting money where you want it. And if you want to get real smart with it and real sort of strategic with it, just start with 3 checking accounts. One for all of your fixed and recurring expenses, one for needs, and one for wants. Those are non-recurring. That is your way of, distributing your money and then ensuring that you actually stick to those decisions. And then this action number 3 is you still want to know where your money's going because you work really hard for it. So even if you're doing the other 2 actions, you're deciding what to do with it and sticking to your plan, you still want to be able to look back and know where your money is going, what's happening to it. And the way that you can do that is just by tracking your distributions. So I use something called a cash flow tracker. That's what my clients use. You can download one for free on my website. And it's when you make those decisions for what to do with your money and you make those distributions, you just write down which accounts you are transferring money into. It's similar to a budget, but the difference is that each category has its own account. So you almost can't have 20 accounts, or I suppose you could if you want. You almost can't have 20 categories because you don't want 20 accounts. So you got to be smart with sort of which ones you want to use.
So your process is really just simplifying it. You've got your 3 different accounts and you're going to have inflows and outflows, but you're not going to get down to the fact that, hey, I just bought a toothbrush at Target yesterday. Let me quick write it down or jot it down in my app or whatever tracking tool, right?
Exactly, because I did that. I tried it back when I was trying to figure all this stuff out. I tried iterations with different tools. So first thing, I'm an Excel guy. So first thing, I just put it all in Excel. No, it's like too much work to get out my laptop every time, or days go by and I don't feel like recording all these transactions. So next thing is I download Mint, and it's like not much better. I tried You Need a Budget or Dave Ramsey's Every Dollar app, and look, those are some great apps if that's what you want to do. So don't get me wrong there. But for me, I was like, this is not really what I want. It got to a point where I was using just pen and paper. Like if I can just carry around a folded up piece of paper with me, there's no more like transferring stuff from my iPhone note to a computer or to the app, whatever it is. So I've tried it and I hated it. And that's what led me to do this other stuff.
I really like that term and the idea of the digital envelopes. Where did you come up with that idea? Was that just thinking by yourself, or have you heard that from somebody else? I think that's a really neat idea.
I'm not sure if I had heard of it prior to me initially thinking about it in that way. I know now there are more and more apps that are popping up that actually they sort of allow you to use the digital envelopes are sort of contained within the app. So you actually don't need multiple bank accounts. You can divvy up your money into these envelopes, and then they have a card with it and an app on your iPhone. So you can go to, the grocery store or the mechanic, whatever it is. And before you actually swipe the card, you open up your phone and select which envelope you want it to come out of, which is pretty cool. Wow. But it's
very cool. With
having only 3 spending accounts, and honestly, to two debit cards that I carry around with those. Like I don't carry around a debit card for my fixed and recurring expenses. Like there's no need for me to. So I don't like the added step of having to get out my phone before I make every single purchase. That's why I don't use those. But yeah, that's I know digital envelope is like a term that people are throwing around now.
And I suppose if you just have your accounts, like you said, it takes away the feeling of anxiousness or guilt after you purchase something too. And it's like in the traditional sense, it's you always have maybe a certain amount of money left over in your budget. That's just like whatever guilt-free money. But if they're just in their own, bank account, you have a certain dollar amount, you see how much is in there, and you don't have any guilt.
Yeah, the anxiety and guilt are very much tied together in this sort of like vicious cycle. So what happens is, you have some sort of amount of money in your typically one checking account. Towards the end of the month or middle of the month, you're like, oh my gosh, what happened? It's half of what it used to be. And now you're like, before you go spend the next purchase, like you start overanalyzing stuff. And now that's where anxiety starts to come from. And until you really master this stuff, until you really, integrate a system into what you're doing, it's just going to continue to get worse and worse and worse. So for sure, especially with the fun spending, like my fun account, my leisure account is one of my favorite accounts because anytime you are, especially when you're trying to be frugal, like I grew up middle class, my parents were frugal and they made you ask these questions, do I really need this? Not how much joy will this bring me? And, but that second question is what you can start asking when you have money set aside for fun money. Like when you already know, okay, I've got $100 or $1,000 or even $10,000 in an account that I know I'm only going to use to enjoy myself, to travel, to go to concerts, whatever it is. Now you can start saying, okay, how do I want to use this to have as much fun as I possibly can? And that's truly guilt-free spending.
Have you I just thought of this as you're speaking. Have you run into issues with having that style of like that free money with a couple? So say like me and my wife, if we had a free account, I probably wouldn't spend much out of it, and my wife would probably be buying a new pair of boots every month. Hopefully she doesn't listen to this episode. But it's like, would you see, like, have you seen that in couples where maybe one person doesn't spend much and the other does, and then they cause some maybe animosity towards, I know it's guilt-free money, but you really need all that constantly?
Yeah, I don't know if I've worked with enough to be able to say like, how common that is. I imagine that's very common. And I've of course heard about it. I think that, one of the quickest fixes is just having an agreed upon amount with two, like you each have your own guilt-free spending account. And so you can have joint accounts for a lot of other stuff, but you really ought to have your own account where you already decide together how much you're going to put in each paycheck or each month or whatever it is. And if you don't spend as much, well, now yours is growing a little bit, and maybe you can spend a bit more on yourself. Or if you decide that you've got some more and you want to spend it on, you and your wife together, you certainly can do that too.
One thing I really like about this system is just the fact of those expenses, the basic living expenses, right? You've got like, if you have a house, a mortgage or a rent, if you're in an apartment, you've got your utilities and your car payments and all that stuff is in its own account. And I think that's what gives a lot of people anxiety, is being able to cover that stuff. And the fact that you have really just completely separated that from the equation of looking and managing your money is really fascinating. It's a really, really cool idea. But Chris, one thing I want to ask you that you've talked about in the past is this idea of a wealth account. Is that is that separate from your fun account, or is that kind of one and the same?
Yeah, it's definitely separate. It's a savings account, and I look at it as a way to invest in myself. And if you're listening, it's a way to invest in yourself. And even if you can also use it to stack money to make a bigger investment, so for a piece of real estate, if you want to go, buy, I don't know, a duplex and Airbnb it or rent it out, whatever it might be. If you're looking to put some money aside for a down payment, I would recommend putting that in, and you call it whatever you want, right? Like I call it my wealth account, but yeah, it's an account that is, again, there for that specific purpose, so that when you come across an opportunity, let's say to hire a coach or buy a course, great, a great coach or a great course, not just like some random thing. But when you come across something great that you're like, wow, I would really love to invest in this for myself, unless that money is set aside, once again, if you're trying to be frugal, if you're coming from that sort of place, it's more likely that you're going to say, no, I don't really need to go spend, a couple $100s on this. I'd much rather put that towards my rent next month. So yeah, having it in a separate account is crucial. And again, the fun part comes in where when you have that money set aside, as it starts to stack up, you can start thinking, how can I be creative with this? What are the best ways that I can actually use this money to invest in myself, to gain better skills, to just create a more enjoyable life for myself?
Yeah, that's pretty awesome. The fact that, so it kind of sounds like you've got the 4 accounts, and that wealth account is really truly to make either you have more education, so, more intellectually wealthy, or invest it, whether it's real estate, stocks, whatever you want to do. But you're going to have it there, and it's not, you have already allocated that towards that purpose, and it's not allocated towards fun, and you don't have to decide that because you've already made that decision. So Chris, a lot of good information here throughout this conversation, a lot of very practical ways to manage your money and very good advice. But we all know that we all have that one type of thing that might not actually be a great financial thing that we purchase. We call it a financial vice, or you can think of it as a guilty pleasure that everyone has. Mine personally would be video games. I like to spend money on that, even though from time to time I know I don't need to, and it does make me feel guilty. But do you have a financial vice of your own?
So, I feel so lame to not have like a great vice guilty pleasure. But what I do spend money on most at the moment, like just most often at least, books. And oftentimes I just sit on my bookshelf if I don't read them. And I know that's not a great sort of vice. Like I'm sure over time I'll have more. But right now I am so like, I'm just having the time of my life working on building my business. And so I love just putting my money back into it. And I truly, like in my free time, I love reading nonfiction, business, finance, marketing, personal development books.
Yeah.
So that's what I spend a ton of money on books.
What is your number one book recommendation?
This is so tough. I really love so many books. Like some have done such phenomenal things for me in my life. So it depends on what you're looking for, right? But, let me take a moment and I'll think about this.
If I think about like some of the books, I would say that was my second guilty pleasure. My second financial vice is books. I'm kind of on the same path as you. I love reading about personal finance, self-development, and all that stuff. But some of the books that have really stuck out to me is Rich Dad, Poor Dad, which I think almost everyone that's in the personal finance space reads. But then I really love Your Money or Your Life, or it might be Your Life or Your Money. I forget which ones comes first, but those have had a profounding impact on my life. One, to just learn what assets and liabilities are, and how you can kind of start thinking about, rather than just going down the traditional sense of buying liabilities up through Rich Dad Poor Dad, of course, but thinking more on the asset side, and how can you buy assets that can then pay for your liabilities. And then Your Money or Your Life really puts it more into perspective about money's not everything, but it does sure help you a lot along the way. And so you really have to balance not just investing, not just saving, but really being purposeful with your money throughout your entire life. And that those things change from time to time, obviously, for a variety of reasons. But I know those are two books that have had a profound impact on my life.
Yeah, for sure. One that has been the most interesting and different, especially in the finance space, is The Psychology of Money by Morgan Housel. I read that last year, and that was not just fascinating, but he's a phenomenal writer. So I really enjoyed reading that. I think I have it on Audible as well. So definitely, and of course, Rich Dad, Poor Dad is a classic that if you're just getting into personal finance, it's really a great mindset shift. Looking back at see what books I've got. The Art and Business of Online Writing is geared for like writing, but it also has some great like business and marketing principles in it by Nicholas Cole. So that's one that I've been going back to as I've tried to just develop my business acumen.
I'm going to have to check out those last two because I have not heard about them and I have not read them.
I said I write them down myself. I'll take a peek.
All right, Chris. Well, we've got one last question before we wrap up the conversation. And that's really, what's going on in your neighborhood? What's going on with Chris Hanna and your financial coaching business? Where can people go out and find more about what you're doing?
Yeah, so I am having a whole lot of fun on TikTok now. People just seem to want to hear more and more about this blackjack stuff, so that's what I've been posting about. It's Chris Allen Hanna, no H at the end of that, Hanna. I think there's actually an underscore at the end of that, but so that's where I am on TikTok. It's basically the same on Instagram and most other social platforms. And you can also, if you're like, hey, I really want to reach out to Chris and get the conversation going, you can shoot me a text, 240-630-0568, and either myself or someone on my team will get back to you.
That's awesome. So anything going on in your neighborhood on the personal side? Anything fun coming up? Anything crazy that you just did?
Well, not crazy.
Another big Vegas for a month?
It's funny. I went to Vegas, let's see, a few months ago, several months ago now, when I was just wanting to not to go play blackjack. I actually didn't play a single hand, but I went out there just to focus on writing. So like I'm working on this money management guide that's really outlining a lot of the principles that we talked about. And I still have comp rooms out there, and I had flight credit with Southwest Airlines. And so just for a little bit of isolation, it was cheaper for me to fly out to Vegas than it was for me to just get a local hotel here. So that's the last time that I was in Vegas.
Crazy.
But my girlfriend and I are going to this, and this is neighborhood to where I am, Frederick, Maryland. There's a restaurant called Firestone that my girlfriend and I went to a couple times. We just sort of discovered it recently. And we love that restaurant, and we've got a Valentine's date scheduled for for Monday. So yeah, that's what we're looking forward to.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice. We'll have an excellent Valentine's Day dinner. I'm sure you'll have a lot of fun out there. But Chris, I will be honest, I'm actually heading out to Vegas tomorrow, so I'm hoping that I can use all of the information you shared here today to maybe make an extra couple bucks.
Sure. Have fun. Have fun. Don't go with Don't go with more money than you're willing to lose. That's my advice.
I love gambling, but I can't do it. I'm just too frugal. I can't spend my money or put my money on the table and actually lose it. It gets to me in my soul. But Chris, thank you so much for joining us here today on the podcast. You know, this has been so much fun learning about your story about counting cards and blackjack, as well as all of the stuff that you've got going on with your financial coaching business. So thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for coming on.
Thank you guys so much. I really appreciate you guys having me on, and I had a great time here as well.
Drew, I got to be honest with you. When we started this podcast, speaking with a professional card counter would have never crossed my mind. So happy that we got the chance to speak with Chris Hanna in the podcast and really learn all about what he's going on. But there was a lot of stuff that was pretty compact, that conversation. What would you say is your main takeaway from it?
Just the uniqueness of it. We said in the intro, and really his path to where he is now is not, I guess, what society may say is normal. And the fact that, you know, college or schooling may be getting tossed on everybody's throat. Maybe it's not for everybody. And the fact that it came to the end of school, he kind of wanted to follow his passion, and it might not have been so structured on how he's going to get where he's going to go, but he was able to take a risk. Money wasn't the biggest thing on top of his mind. It was following a passion, and that has led his success to where he is now. And I think that is the coolest thing about it, is there's not a set way from start to finish, and everything you're taught growing up is you do this, then you do that, then you do this, and then you retire. And the fact that it was so all over the place, but all kept the same theme of having passion and having calculated risks has just gone throughout Chris's life so far.
Really the true spirit of entrepreneurship at the end of the day, the fact that he took the chance. You know, we talked with Chris a little bit after the fact, and I don't think that he mentioned this, but he turned down a Wall Street job out of college to chase his dream of card counting, and it played out really well for him. And then that obviously snowballed down into now through the financial coaching business. So being able to find that passion, but then also chase it, I would 100% agree with you. I think that is something that's super powerful. Now, Drew, I'm going to cheat this week. I think I've got two key takeaways.
Okay.
The first being the fact that through his blackjack and the fact that he wasn't gambling, he was actually statistically counting cards, making calculated bets, and knowing what the rules of the game were. He really learned how to do that while managing his emotions. I can't imagine what it's like when you've got $1,000, $2,000, $5,000, whatever dollars on the blackjack table and lose it, but being okay with that. But the fact that he learned how to manage his emotions, that then can translate over to the investing world. Because right, when we think about investing, just think about the stock market, how much up and down that goes. Specifically right now, we saw a huge correction.
Yeah.
But if you can manage your emotions and you can stick with your plan, I think that's such a key aspect to have when you are investing.
That theme of emotions from blackjack, or what some people may say is just gambling, over towards personal finance and investing. I mean, that is quite the theme. It's when you're not able to manage those emotions, you get into a situation where you make decisions that you don't want to, and maybe that's emotions come up more because you don't have a plan. And being able to start a personal finance journey, have some more financial literacy, starting a budget, having a reason why you want your money to go somewhere will eventually help that emotion being taken out of your money, because you know the plan, you know the calculations, you know the probabilities, and all those things will help. But with money, emotions can always be such a big factor into it. And
absolutely.
I just think that theme coming over is pretty cool.
But Drew, like I said, I'm going to cheat this week. My second one is just his way that he views budgeting. I think it's so cool. The fact that he has taken basically the traditional envelope system, which for our listeners, if you didn't understand from the conversation, is you literally take envelopes and put cash in it and you allocate that envelope for a specific purpose. So you would have like a grocery envelope, you would have a gas envelope, all the way through your whole budget. But the fact that he has really systematized the envelope system to the digital world, and he doesn't actually keep track of expenses, but he just knows that what's ever in my fun account, I'm going to spend it on fun. What's ever on my wants account, I'm going to spend that on wants, and whatever's in my needs account, I'm going to spend it on that. And I think that's just such a cool and unique way to think about managing your money, because for a lot of people, it's such a roadblock to budget and to track every single expense. And a lot of people try it, they fail, and then they just give up. So this might be a good way for, if you, the listener, if you're one of those people, it might be a good way for you to get on a budget, but not in the traditional sense.
Yeah, that was one of the points I was going to bring up as you're speaking there, is the simplification of it. Yes, you might have a couple bank accounts, but the fact of setting aside that money into, here's my fix, like here's utilities, here's my mortgage, here's X amount that I'm putting into my Roth IRA, everything. That one just over here. So you never have to worry about those not getting paid for, because you're already covering that in that bank account. And then you have a simplification of having your wants and your needs, and you can, instead of, hey, I went to McDonald's today, I'm writing that down onto my computer, bring it over to my Excel sheet, and then I gassed up and I did this, and it gets so tedious keeping track of your transactions that you get burnt out and you just don't want to do it, or you get behind on it. And the fact that you can look at a bank account and say, I have money in this account, I know I can afford whatever I'm potentially looking at right now, is just a way for this whole mechanism to be simplified, and it keeps a potential of you staying on track because you're not getting burnt out from the tediousness and, being bogged down by all these transactions. What's a stock split? A stock split is when a company increases their outstanding shares to increase their liquidity. Although the outstanding shares may be increased, the actual price of the stock will be decreased in proportion. So the value of your stock or the company has not changed. Two of the most common reasons for a stock split is, one, the stock price is too high and retail investors have a harder time getting in. The second reason is they just want to be able to boost their liquidity. An example of a stock split will be Google. They're actually doing a 20-for-1 stock split on July 15th of 2022. Google's price currently is $2,780. So for a 20-for-1 split, we're going to divide that $2,780 by 20, and that's going to give us roughly a stock price of $139 per share. If you were holding 100 shares of Google before the stock split, your 100 shares would then turn into 2,000 shares, and that's a stock split.
All right, Drew, so what's going on in the neighborhood this week?
Well, this week, or it's going to be weekend actually, so it's going to be in the future, I'm pretty excited. My wife and I are going to be going skiing, downhill skiing, and it's something I haven't really done since last winter. So it'll be the first time going out, and I'm really excited. We have my wife's mom and sister coming to the house to watch a kid for like a half day. We're probably gonna go skiing for like a half day, so very thankful that we can have family around to help out with the kid.
Nice.
And it'll be a nice little date half day for my wife and I, and I'm just really excited to go out skiing. I've been watching the Olympics. I've been seeing downhill skiing, moguls. Speaking of moguls, I think I'd blow out my knees if I if I actually did moguls.
I'm right there with you.
But I've been seeing that. I've been following that stuff on Instagram, so every time I'm swiping, I'm starting to see downhill skiing in the mountains. And I was out in Breckenridge last year and went downhill skiing, and I just kind of been, I don't know if it's hooked, but if we have mountains or not mountains, but if we have hills to ski down and we have the opportunity, I would like to go downhill skiing. So I'm pretty excited for that, and hopefully I'm sore the next day from it.
I'm pretty jealous. I snowboard, but I'm pretty jealous that you're getting out on the slopes, because I have not gone out on the slopes, I think, since we've had kids, which now is probably 3 years. We're 3 years removed or something like that from actually getting out on the slopes. But yeah, so that sounds like an excellent time, and we've got good snow for it, or so I hear.
Well, I think it's going to be about 2 degrees, so it's going to be a little chilly, but we got quite a bit of snow this last week. I don't know what the rest of the week is calling for, but if it's going to be that cold, probably not much snow, but there should be plenty up there, and we'll see where it takes us.
Nice.
Anything crazy in your world?
So yeah, actually, like I said in the conversation with Chris, Hannah, my wife, and I are actually heading out to Vegas for her birthday. Just a little long weekend getaway. It's just going to be me and her. It's actually our first time away for an extended period of time from our 2 kids. So looking forward to it is maybe not the right word, but it will be nice to actually get out and just be adults and just be together, not just for her birthday, but obviously Valentine's Day is coming up.
Yep.
So be able to spend the long weekend out in Vegas.
You know,
maybe use some of Chris's tips on the blackjack table.
You might have to.
Who knows?
You might have to. The real question here is, if you're going to Vegas, so you're leaving your kids where you don't get much sleep, but now you're going to go to Vegas, a place that you get even less sleep. So are you actually going to be living the Vegas life and not sleeping, or are you just going to have the hotel room and just say taking naps all day?
Well, I've been to Vegas one time, and we got in at like 11 o'clock or midnight, and we were up till like 4 or 5 in the morning. So I tell myself that we're going to try to keep it low key and not do that. But I know that my personality is, once I get there, I'm going to see the bright lights. I'm going to see the live music or whatever it is, all the people and everything that's going on, all the commotion.
And you're a night owl.
And we're probably going to be out late. Let's be honest.
You're going to be having sushi at 1 in the morning.
Yeah.
That's actually probably early for a lot of people, and they hear me say that.
Yeah.
Like, that's not late.
They're like 1 in the morning. That's when we're just getting heated up.
Yeah, so I guess what happens in Vegas is going to stay in Vegas, whether it be your sleep or not. And that's wrapping up another episode of The Neighborhood Money. Another great conversation with Chris. His journey has been so fun to listen to. I hope to continue to follow his journey. I know we'll be following him on his socials. I know his TikTok is starting to blow up, so go check him out. He has some great blackjack information on there. But still, with his financial coaching, there's a lot of, the ceiling. I mean, the ceiling is as high as he wants it to be. So I'm really excited to see where Chris takes this endeavor. And for you guys listening, being on this journey with us, we want to thank you for that. Don't forget to subscribe if you can. It helps immensely. But with all that said, we'll see you next week in the neighborhood.